I never thought I'd be the one telling this story. For years, I was the silent one, watching, working, waiting. My name is Emma Anderson, and 3 months ago, my father handed over Anderson Construction and Development, the company I'd devoted my entire adult life to my younger brother Ryan, just like that. 30 years of building an empire, and my father passed me over without even blinking. The company needs a man at the helm, he told me, as if those words wouldn't cut through me like glass. 20 years I'd worked there, climbing from summer, intern to operations director. I designed our flagship projects, secured our biggest clients, and modernized our entire approach. But none of that mattered when it came time for succession. What my father and brother didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this betrayal for years. I had an agreement, a silent partner arrangement that would change everything. And when the dust settled, Anderson Construction would never be the same. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Portland as a little girl, Anderson Construction was my playground. My father, Robert Anderson, started the business in an old warehouse by the river when I was just 3 years old. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting on his desk, coloring while he worked on blueprints. "Emma," he'd say, pointing to the intricate drawings, "one day all of this will be part of your world." I believed him. With my whole heart, I believed him. Ryan came along when I was 7. From the moment my parents brought him home, everything changed. My father had always been a traditional man, but his joy at having a son was something different altogether. I remember standing in the doorway of the nursery, watching Dad hold Ryan up to the window, showing him the city skyline. "See those buildings?" he whispered. "Some of those are ours. And one day, son, all of this will be yours." I was just a child, but I understood what those words meant. Still, I pushed that memory down. I chose to believe that my father meant yours, collectively, that Ryan and I would share the legacy. Throughout school, I focused on everything that would prepare me for Anderson Construction. While other kids my age were going to parties, I was taking extra math classes. When my high school friends were planning their summer breaks, I was applying for internships at architectural firms. My dream wasn't just to join the family business, it was to elevate it. Portland was growing rapidly in those years, transforming from a modest city into a thriving urban center. Anderson Construction grew with it, securing contracts for commercial buildings, apartment complexes, and eventually, government projects. By the time I graduated from college with my degree in business and a minor in architectural design, the company had tripled in size. My first official day at Anderson Construction was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected to start in project management, where I could use my education and the knowledge I'd gained from years of watching my father. Instead, Dad placed me in marketing. "You're good with people, Emma," he said, as if it were a compliment and not a dismissal of everything else I brought to the table. "Your brother will be joining us after he finishes school. He'll need to learn the operational side." Ryan was still in college then, struggling through a business degree he had no passion for. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks, determined to prove myself. I built our marketing department from the ground up, created our digital presence, and secured partnerships that brought in millions. Yet, every time I suggested moving to operations or project development, my father would smile and say, "In time, sweetheart. In time." That time never came. Instead, when Ryan graduated, he walked straight into a vice president position. I still remember the company-wide email announcement. "Please join me in welcoming Ryan Anderson as our new Vice President of Operations. With his fresh perspective and innovative ideas, Ryan will help lead Anderson Construction into the future." I sat at my desk, staring at those words on my screen. Fresh perspective? Innovative ideas? Ryan had never shown interest in construction beyond the money it generated. He'd never stayed late reviewing contracts or gone to a site at dawn to check progress. I had done those things. For years, I had done those things. That night, I met my best friend Olivia at Brew Point, our favorite coffee shop in the Pearl District. Liv had been my confidant since college, the one person who understood my complicated relationship with my family and the business. "He's never going to see you, Em," she said, stirring her latte. "Your dad is stuck in 1975. In his mind, this company goes from father to son. Period." "It's not fair," I said, hating how childish those words sounded. "I've earned my place." "Then take it," Liv said simply. "Stop waiting for your dad to hand you anything. Find another way." That conversation changed everything. The next day, I walked into Portland City Bank and met with Claire Peterson, a loan officer I'd known for years through business networking. I walked out with preliminary approval for a substantial business loan, enough to start my own firm if I wanted to. But I didn't want to start over. I wanted what was rightfully mine. A week later, I had lunch with James Carter. James owned Carter Architectural Innovations, a firm that had often partnered with Anderson Construction on projects. Over salmon and white wine, I laid out a proposition that would alter both our futures. "I'm not asking for charity," I told him. "I'm offering a partnership. Your expertise in architectural innovation, my knowledge of construction operations, and my family's company. Together, we could transform the industry in the Pacific Northwest." James studied me over the rim of his glass. "And what exactly do you want from me, Emma?" "Investment," I said. "Enough to secure a significant stake in Anderson Construction when the time comes. And patience. This won't happen overnight." "Your father would never sell to me," James pointed out. "Our firms compete as often as they collaborate." I smiled. "He wouldn't be selling to you. He'd be selling to me. You'd be the silent partner." That day, we drafted the beginnings of our agreement. James would provide the financial backing I needed, and in return, he would receive a percentage of the company once I secured control. It wasn't just about money. James had connections throughout the industry, technological resources my father had always resisted, and most importantly, he believed in my vision for the future of construction in ways my father never had. For the next 5 years, I played the role my father expected. I ran marketing, expanded our client base, and never complained when Ryan received credit for ideas that originated with me. All the while, I was learning everything about the company, every contract, every client relationship, every financial detail. I took night classes in construction management and structural engineering. I cultivated relationships with our subcontractors, often visiting sites when Ryan couldn't be bothered. I was building my case, piece by piece, like the structures we erected across Portland. Meanwhile, James and I refined our plan. Our silent partner agreement evolved into a comprehensive strategy. We established a separate LLC that would eventually serve as the vehicle for acquiring shares in Anderson Construction. We identified potential allies within the company, employees who had been overlooked or undervalued, just as I had been. Through it all, I kept my ambitions hidden from my family. At Sunday dinners in my parents' Lake Oswego home, I would listen to my father and Ryan discuss company matters as if I weren't even in the room. My mother, Patricia, would occasionally interject with, "Why don't you ask Emma about that marketing angle?" Or Emma had a great idea about the Riverside project, but her attempts were always brushed aside. Ryan grew more confident with each passing year, but not more competent. Projects ran over budget under his supervision. Clients complained about communication breakdowns. Employees in his division had the highest turnover rate in the company. Yet my father saw none of it, or chose not to. The crisis point came during the bid for the Portland Municipal Center renovation, the largest government contract in the city's history. Ryan insisted on handling the proposal himself, dismissing my offers to help despite my experience with similar projects. The night before the submission deadline, he called me in a panic. "Emma, I've messed up the numbers. The materials estimates are all wrong, and the labor projections don't account for the historical preservation requirements." I spent the entire night rebuilding the proposal from scratch. When it won us the contract, Ryan accepted the congratulations without once mentioning my contribution. At the celebration dinner, my father raised a toast to Ryan, whose exceptional work secured the most prestigious project in Anderson Construction's history. I looked around the table at our executive team, many of whom knew exactly who had rescued that proposal. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave me small nods of acknowledgement. Harold Jenkins, my father's right-hand man for 20 years, actually winked at me from across the table. That night, I called James. "It's time," I said. "I'm done waiting for recognition that's never going to come." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we move forward, there's no going back." I thought about the decades I'd invested, the nights and weekends sacrificed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The constant struggle to be seen not just as Robert Anderson's daughter, but as a capable, innovative leader in my own right. "I'm sure," I said. "Let's do this." What I didn't know then was that my father was already making his own plans. Plans that would both devastate me and ultimately give me the opening I needed. Because sometimes, the most painful betrayals lead to the most powerful transformations. And my transformation was just beginning. 2 weeks after the municipal center contract celebration, my father called a board meeting. As the marketing director, I wasn't technically required to attend, but I'd made myself indispensable enough over the years that my presence was expected. I arrived early, as was my habit, and set up in my usual seat halfway down the long conference table in our downtown office. Board members filtered in, mostly longtime friends of my father, with a few industry professionals he'd added for appearance's sake. Ryan arrived last, flashing his easy smile as he took the seat to our father's right. I noticed he was wearing a new suit and wondered absently if it was purchased specifically for this occasion. My father cleared his throat, bringing the room to attention. "Thank you all for being here today. After much consideration and discussion with key stakeholders, I've made a decision about the future leadership of Anderson Construction." The room went quiet. I felt my heart rate accelerate but kept my expression neutral. This announcement wasn't scheduled. There had been no succession planning committee, no formal evaluation process. "As you know, I've reached an age where I need to think about the next chapter for this company," my father continued. "A company that my own father started with nothing but a toolbox and determination that I've built into one of the most respected firms in the Northwest." He looked around the room, his gaze touching each face but lingering on Ryan's. "Leadership transitions are never easy, but they're necessary for growth and continued success. That's why, effective next month, I'll be stepping down as CEO of Anderson Construction and Development." Murmurs circled the table. This wasn't entirely unexpected. My father was approaching 70, but the timing was sudden. "In my place," he said, and now he was smiling directly at Ryan. "I'm proud to announce that my son, Ryan Anderson, will be taking the helm as Chief Executive Officer." The room erupted in applause. I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water, my entire body going numb even as I mechanically brought my hands together, joining the celebration on autopilot. Ryan stood, accepting handshakes and backslaps with practiced humility. "And to ensure a smooth transition," my father added once. The noise had died down. "I'll be staying on as chairman of the board for the next year." Only then did he look at me, perhaps registering for the first time that I might have something to say about this decision. "Emma, of course, will continue to lead our marketing efforts, where she's done exemplary work." Exemplary work. After 20 years, that was my consolation prize. The meeting continued. discussing transition logistics and announcement strategies, but I barely heard it. I was already calculating my next steps, mentally accelerating the timeline James and I had established. When the board adjourned, I slipped out before anyone could offer me their condolences, or worse, ask how I felt about my younger brother becoming my boss. As I walked back to my office, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "How bad was it?" I responded with a single word: nuclear. Then I called James. "It happened," I said when he answered. "Ryan's taking over next month." James was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Emma. Even knowing it was coming, that has to hurt." "I don't have time for hurt," I replied. "We need to move up our timeline. How quickly can we access the investment?" "Capital?" "The funds are ready," he said. "But Emma, are you sure you want to act while you're emotional? Maybe take a few days to—" "I've taken enough days," I cut in. "I've taken years. If we wait, Ryan will start making changes, bringing in his own people. We need to act while the company structure is still what we know and understand." James sighed. "All right. Let's meet tomorrow to finalize the details." As I hung up, my assistant knocked on my door. "Your brother wants to see you in his office," she said, already adjusting to the new power dynamic. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and prepared to face Ryan with a composure I was far from feeling. Because while he might be celebrating his coronation, I was already planning his reckoning. A week later, I had lunch with James Carter. James owned Carter Architectural Innovations, a firm that had often partnered with Anderson Construction on projects. Over salmon and white wine, I laid out a proposition that would alter both our futures. "I'm not asking for charity," I told him. "I'm offering a partnership. Your expertise in architectural innovation, my knowledge of construction operations, and my family's company. Together, we could transform the industry in the Pacific Northwest." James studied me over the rim of his glass. "And what exactly do you want from me, Emma?" "Investment," I said. "Enough to secure a significant stake in Anderson Construction when the time comes. And patience. This won't happen overnight." "Your father would never sell to me," James pointed out. "Our firms compete as often as they collaborate." I smiled. "He wouldn't be selling to you. He'd be selling to me. You'd be the silent partner." That day, we drafted the beginnings of our agreement. James would provide the financial backing I needed, and in return, he would receive a percentage of the company once I secured control. It wasn't just about money. James had connections throughout the industry, technological resources my father had always resisted, and most importantly, he believed in my vision for the future of construction in ways my father never had. For the next 5 years, I played the role my father expected. I ran marketing, expanded our client base, and never complained when Ryan received credit for ideas that originated with me. All the while, I was learning everything about the company. Every contract, every client relationship, every financial detail. I took night classes in construction management and structural engineering. I cultivated relationships with our subcontractors, often visiting sites when Ryan couldn't be bothered. I was building my case, piece by piece, like the structures we erected across Portland. Meanwhile, James and I refined our plan. Our silent partner agreement evolved into a comprehensive strategy. We established a separate LLC that would eventually serve as the vehicle for acquiring shares in Anderson Construction. We identified potential allies within the company, employees who had been overlooked or undervalued, just as I had been. Through it all, I kept my ambitions hidden from my family. At Sunday dinners in my parents' Lake Oswego home, I would listen to my father and Ryan discuss company matters as if I weren't even in the room. My mother, Patricia, would occasionally interject with, "Why don't you ask Emma about that marketing angle?" Or, "Emma had a great idea about the Riverside project," but her attempts were always brushed aside. Ryan grew more confident with each passing year, but not more competent. Projects ran over budget under his supervision. Clients complained about communication breakdowns. Employees in his division had the highest turnover rate in the company. Yet my father saw none of it, or chose not to. The crisis point came during the bid for the Portland Municipal Center renovation, the largest government contract in the city's history. Ryan insisted on handling the proposal himself, dismissing my offers to help despite my experience with similar projects. The night before the submission deadline, he called me in a panic. "Emma, I've messed up the numbers. The materials estimates are all wrong, and the labor projections don't account for the historical preservation requirements." I spent the entire night rebuilding the proposal from scratch. When it won us the contract, Ryan accepted the congratulations without once mentioning my contribution. At the celebration dinner, my father raised a toast. To Ryan, whose exceptional work secured the most prestigious project in Anderson Construction's history. I looked around the table at our executive team, many of whom knew exactly who had rescued that proposal. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave me small nods of acknowledgement. Harold Jenkins, my father's right-hand man for 20 years, actually winked at me from across the table. That night, I called James. "It's time," I said. "I'm done waiting for recognition that's never going to come." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we move forward, there's no going back." I thought about the decades I'd invested, the nights and weekends sacrificed, the constant struggle to be seen not just as Robert Anderson's daughter, but as a capable, innovative leader in my own right. "I'm sure," I said. "Let's do this." What I didn't know then was that my father was already making his own plans that would both devastate me and ultimately give me the opening I needed. Because sometimes, the most painful betrayals lead to the most powerful transformations. And my transformation was just beginning. 2 weeks after the Municipal Center contract celebration, my father called a board meeting. As the marketing director, I wasn't technically required to attend, but I'd made myself indispensable enough over the years that my presence was expected. I arrived early, as was my habit, and set up in my usual seat halfway down the long conference table in our downtown office. Board members filtered in, mostly longtime friends of my father, with a few industry professionals he'd added for appearance's sake. Ryan arrived last, flashing his easy smile as he took the seat to our father's right. I noticed he was wearing a new suit and wondered absently if it was purchased specifically for this occasion. My father cleared his throat, bringing the room to attention. "Thank you all for being here today. After much consideration and discussion with key stakeholders, I've made a decision about the future leadership of Anderson Construction." The room went quiet. I felt my heart rate accelerate but kept my expression neutral. This announcement wasn't scheduled. There had been no succession planning committee, no formal evaluation process. As you know, I've reached an age where I need to think about the next chapter for this company, my father continued. A company that my own father started with nothing but a toolbox and determination, that I've built into one of the most respected firms in the Northwest. He looked around the room, his gaze touching each face but lingering on Ryan's. Leadership transitions are never easy, but they're necessary for growth and continued success. That's why, effective next month, I'll be stepping down as CEO of Anderson Construction and Development. Murmurs circled the table. This wasn't entirely unexpected. My father was approaching 70, but the timing was sudden. "In my place," he said, and now he was smiling directly at Ryan. "I'm proud to announce that my son, Ryan Anderson, will be taking the helm as Chief Executive Officer." The room erupted in applause. I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water, my entire body going numb even as I mechanically brought my hands together, joining the celebration on autopilot. Ryan stood, accepting handshakes and backslaps with practiced humility. And to ensure a smooth transition, my father added once. The noise had died down. "I'll be staying on as chairman of the board for the next year. Only then did he look at me, perhaps registering for the first time that I might have something to say about this decision. Emma, of course, will continue to lead our marketing efforts, where she's done exemplary work. Exemplary work. After 20 years, that was my consolation prize. The meeting continued, discussing transition logistics and announcement strategies, but I barely heard it. I was already calculating my next steps, mentally accelerating the timeline James and I had established. When the board adjourned, I slipped out before anyone could offer me their condolences, or worse, ask how I felt about my younger brother becoming my boss. As I walked back to my office, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. How bad was it? I responded with a single word, nuclear. Then I called James. It happened, I said when he answered. Ryan's taking over next month. James was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Emma. Even knowing it was coming, that has to hurt. I don't have time for hurt, I replied. We need to move up our timeline. How quickly can we access the investment? Capital? The funds are ready, he said. But Emma, are you sure you want to act while you're emotional? Maybe take a few days to... I've taken enough days, I cut in. I've taken years. If we wait, Ryan will start making changes, bringing in his own people. We need to act while the company structure is still what we know and understand. James sighed. All right, let's meet tomorrow to finalize the details. As I hung up, my assistant knocked on my door. Your brother wants to see you in his office, she said, already adjusting to the new power dynamic. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and prepared to face Ryan with a composure I was far from feeling. Because while he might be celebrating his coronation, I was already planning his reckoning. Ryan's office was twice the size of mine, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. He'd decorated it minimally, our father's influence showing in the leather furniture and dark wood accents. When I entered, he was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. Emma, he said, turning with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks for coming. Congratulations, I replied, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Dad must be very proud. Ryan gestured to one of the chairs across from his desk. I wanted to talk to you before rumors start flying. I sat, crossing my legs and settling my hands in my lap. Poised. Professional. As if my entire world hadn't just been upended. I know this must be complicated for you, Ryan began, choosing his words carefully. You've been here longer than I have. 20 years, I said quietly, compared to your 8. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Right, and I want you to know that I value your experience. Your knowledge of the company is unmatched. Except by Dad, I pointed out. Of course. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Look, Emma, I need you. The transition will be smoother with you on board. The employees trust you, the clients know you. I'm not trying to push you out. I studied my brother's face. In many ways, he looked like a younger version of our father, the same strong jaw, the same confidence set to his shoulders. But there was something missing. Dad had built his company from nothing. Ryan was simply inheriting the fruits of others. Labor. What exactly are you offering me, Ryan? I asked. He straightened, seemingly relieved that we were moving to practical matters. I'd like to promote you to Chief Marketing Officer. Full executive status, board seat, substantial raise. You'd report directly to me, of course, but you'd have complete autonomy over your department. A promotion that changed my title, but not my role. A seat at a table where decisions would already be made. It was exactly what I'd expected. I appreciate the offer, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll need some time to consider it. Ryan looked surprised. He'd expected immediate gratitude, I realized. He'd thought this crumb would satisfy me. Of course, he recovered quickly. Take the weekend. We can talk more on Monday. I rose to leave, then paused at the door. Ryan, why do you think Dad chose you? The question caught him off guard. I suppose because I've been groomed for this. I've been handling operations, working directly with him on strategy. And you think that makes you the best person to lead this company? His expression hardened slightly. Dad thinks so. The board agrees. Isn't that what matters? I smiled faintly. I guess we'll see. The next morning, I met James at his office in the Pearl District. Carter Architectural Innovations occupied the top floor of a renovated industrial building, all exposed brick and steel beams, with sleek modern furnishings that spoke to James's forward-thinking approach. Unlike my father, James had embraced technological innovation, implementing virtual reality for client walkthroughs and advanced modeling software that put Anderson Construction's methods to shame. James was waiting for me in his conference room, along with two people I didn't recognize, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s and a younger man with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Emma, this is Diana Winters, my legal counsel, James said, and Mark Chen, our financial strategist. They've been briefed on our plans and are bound by confidentiality agreements. We spent the morning finalizing our strategy. The LLC James Boy and I had established Phoenix Development Group would approach my father with an offer to purchase a controlling interest in Anderson Construction. Given my father's recent announcement, we had legitimate business reasons to believe he might be interested in extracting capital now that succession was settled. Your father doesn't know that you're behind Phoenix, Diana pointed out. Is there a reason we're keeping that hidden initially? My father would never sell to me, I explained. He doesn't believe I can run the company. That's why he chose Ryan. If he knew I was behind the offer, he'd reject it outright. And what if he rejects it anyway? Mark asked. Anderson Construction isn't publicly traded. He's under no obligation to consider acquisition offers. James and I exchanged glances. This was where our plan got more complex and more aggressive. We have leverage, I said carefully. Over the past 5 years, I've documented multiple instances where Ryan's mismanagement has put the company at risk. Projects that went significantly over budget because he ignored recommendations. Contracts that were nearly lost due to his negligence. The municipal center bid that I saved at the 11th hour. I pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table. I've also identified several irregularities in our financial reporting. Nothing illegal, but definitely concerning for a company of our size and reputation. If these were to become known to our major clients or banking partners, Diana raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we threaten your family's company? I'm suggesting we make my father understand that continued independent operation under Ryan's leadership poses significant risks, I corrected. We're offering a solution. One that keeps the Anderson name, protects the legacy, and ensures the company's future success. James leaned forward. We're not looking to destroy Anderson Construction. We want to improve it. The current leadership model is outdated and limiting. Emma has a vision for what this company could become, but she's been held back at every turn. Diana didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. I'll draft the acquisition proposal. Clean, professional, with no hint of pressure. If it's rejected, we can reassess. And I'll prepare the financial analysis, Mark added. Based on industry standards and Anderson's public contracts, I can make a fair valuation for our initial offer. We spent the rest of the day working through details, timelines, contingency plans. By the time I left James's office, the sun was setting over the Portland skyline, a skyline dotted with buildings my family's company had helped create. I felt a strange mix of emotions: determination, anxiety, and something like grief. I was preparing to fight for what I deserved, but I was also acknowledging that my relationship with my father would never be the same afterward. Monday morning, I arrived at the office to find an email from Ryan outlining my new responsibilities as Chief Marketing Officer. He'd already assumed I'd accepted the position, Typical. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the day moving pieces into place. I had lunch with Harold Jenkins, my father's trusted deputy, carefully testing the waters about his retirement plans and his thoughts on Ryan's leadership. Harold had always been kind to me, one of the few executives who recognized my contributions. "Your brother has enthusiasm," Harold said diplomatically as he cut into his steak. "But enthusiasm isn't the same as experience." "Dad seems confident in his decision," I remarked. Harold's eyes met mine. "Your father is a proud man, Emma. He's built something remarkable, and he wants to believe it will continue as he envisions. But between us, I'm concerned." "About the transition?" "About the future," Harold corrected. "This industry is changing. We need innovation, adaptability. Ryan." He trailed off, then shrugged. "Let's just say I've updated my retirement portfolio recently." That was all I needed to hear. Harold wouldn't actively oppose my father, but he wouldn't stand in my way either. One more piece in place. After lunch, I visited our biggest job site, the municipal center renovation. The project manager, Teresa Guzman, had worked with Anderson Construction for 15 years and had been repeatedly passed over for executive positions despite her exceptional track record. "How's it going?" I asked as we walked through the partially demolished interior. Workers in hard hats nodded respectfully as we passed. Many knew me from my frequent site visits. "On schedule so far," Teresa said, "but I'm worried about the changes Ryan approved yesterday." I stopped walking. "What changes?" Teresa handed me her tablet, showing revised plans that significantly altered the structural approach we'd outlined in our bid. "He says this will save time, but honestly, it's going to cause problems with the historical preservation requirements. We could face penalties, maybe even lose the contract if the city committee objects." I studied the plans, anger building. This was exactly the kind of short-sighted decision-making that made Ryan dangerous to the company's future. "Have you raised your concerns with him?" Teresa's expression told me everything. "He said I should trust his instincts, and that the city won't notice or care about the minor adjustments." I handed back the tablet. "Document everything, Teresa. Every communication, every change order, every concern you raise. And if you need support pushing back, come to me directly." She looked surprised but nodded. "You're the only executive who actually visits the sites regularly. The crews have noticed." That comment stayed with me as I drove back to the office. It wasn't just about ownership or titles. It was about understanding the actual work, the daily challenges faced by the people who physically built what Anderson Construction sold. My father had known this once, back when he was hands-on. Ryan had never learned it. When I returned to my office, I had a message waiting. Phoenix Development Group's offer for Anderson Construction had been delivered to my father that afternoon. Now we would wait for his reaction. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:45 p.m., my office phone rang. "My office. Now." My father's voice was ice cold before he hung up. As I walked the corridor to his corner office, I felt strangely calm. The die was cast. Whatever happened next, I had taken action instead of continuing to accept the injustice of being overlooked. My father was standing when I entered. The acquisition offer spread across his desk. Ryan was there too, his face flushed with anger. "Do you know anything about this?" my father demanded, jabbing a finger at the documents. I kept my expression neutral. "About what?" "Don't play games, Emma. Phoenix Development Group. They've made an offer to buy controlling interest in Anderson Construction. Out of nowhere." His eyes narrowed. "The timing is suspicious, don't you think? Right after I announce Ryan's promotion." I moved further into the office, taking a seat without being invited. "It's a business, Dad. Acquisitions happen. What does the offer look like?" Ryan made a disgusted sound. It's insulting. They're vultures, circling because they think we're vulnerable during the transition. Actually, I said, scanning the top document, this looks like a very fair valuation, premium over market rate, in fact, and they want to retain the Anderson name, keep existing management structures in place. I looked up at my father. What exactly is insulting about it? My father studied me with new suspicion. You seem remarkably calm about an outside entity trying to take over our family company. I met his gaze steadily. I'm evaluating it objectively, as any executive should. Isn't that what you've always taught us? To make business decisions based on facts, not emotions? This isn't just any business decision, Ryan interjected. This is our legacy. Is it? I asked, turning to him. Or is it Dad's legacy that you're inheriting without having earned it? The room went silent. My father's face darkened with anger. That's enough, Emma. This company has been built with Anderson blood and sweat. We're not selling to some faceless development group. No, matter how fair their offer might seem. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Then I guess you've made your decision. Will that be all? My father looked momentarily thrown by my calm. He'd expected emotion, tears perhaps, or pleading. Instead, he got professional detachment. Yes, that will be all. I'll contact them to decline. I nodded and turned to leave. Emma, my father called after me. I paused at the door. I expected more loyalty from you. I looked back over my shoulder. Funny, I expected the same from you. The next morning, I woke to a text from James. Check your email. Plan B is in motion. Plan B was more aggressive than our initial approach. Since a straightforward acquisition offer had been rejected, we were moving to apply pressure. I opened my laptop and found James's email, which included a detailed report prepared by Mark Chen. The document analyzed 5 years of Anderson Construction's financial and operational performance, with particular emphasis on projects under Ryan's management. The data told a damning story: increased costs, decreased efficiency, and alarming patterns of risk. Attached was a note from Diana Winters outlining our next steps. Phoenix Development Group would request a meeting with the full Anderson Construction Board, not just my father, to present their concerns and a revised offer. The leverage would be implicit: either consider our acquisition proposal or risk having this analysis shared with key clients and banking partners. It was hardball, and it made my stomach knot. These were tactics I'd never imagined using against my own family. But then I remembered 20 years of being overlooked, of watching Ryan fail upward while I remained trapped in a role that didn't reflect my abilities or contributions. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a structured, navy dress that projected authority. At the office, I maintained my routine as if nothing had changed. I led the marketing team meeting, reviewed our quarterly strategy, and took a conference call with a potential client. All the while, I waited for the bomb to drop. It came just after lunch. My father's assistant appeared at my door, her expression carefully neutral. There's an emergency board meeting at 3 o'clock. Your father requests your presence. I thanked her and returned to my work, though my concentration was shot. At 2:55, I gathered my tablet and a notepad and made my way to the boardroom. Most of the board members were already there, speaking in hushed tones that ceased when I entered. Ryan arrived last, looking tense as he took his seat beside our father. Thank you all for coming on short notice, my father began once everyone was settled. I've called this meeting because Anderson Construction has received a concerning communication from Phoenix Development Group, the same entity that recently made an acquisition offer. He gestured to his assistant, who distributed copies of the financial analysis James had sent me that morning. They've requested a meeting with the full board to discuss what they call serious concerns about operational management and financial stability. In essence, they're suggesting that our company is being mismanaged and that their acquisition would prevent potential disaster. Murmurs rippled around the table. I kept my expression carefully neutral as several board members glanced in my direction. They knew I was the operations expert in the family despite my marketing title. I find the timing suspicious, my father continued, coming immediately after our leadership transition announcement. It appears to be a pressure tactic. Harold. Jenkins cleared his throat. Have we reviewed their analysis for accuracy? Ryan scoffed. It's clearly manipulated data designed to create the appearance of problems where none exist. Actually, I said, speaking for the first time, I've had a chance to review the document, and the data appears to be drawn directly from our own project reports and financial statements. It would be difficult to manipulate those numbers. All eyes turned to me. My father's gaze was particularly sharp. You've reviewed it already? How? I met his eyes calmly. It was sent to all department heads this morning. As marketing director, I received a copy. I assumed everyone at this table had as well. This wasn't true, of course, but it created plausible deniability for my prior knowledge, while revealing that Phoenix had escalated their approach by contacting multiple executives. That's outrageous, Ryan sputtered. They're approaching our employees directly now? Just the executive team, I corrected, which is standard procedure in potential acquisition scenarios. I turned to the rest of the board. And Ryan, these aren't anonymous claims. These are documented facts about project performance. The Riverside Tower went 22% over budget under your supervision. The Lakeside office complex faced 3 construction delays. The Harrison Hotel renovation nearly lost its historical tax credits due to unauthorized modifications. The room went silent. I'd never publicly challenged Ryan before, and certainly not with such specific criticisms. Emma, my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. Whose side are you on? I looked around the table at the board members, people who had known me for years, who had watched me work tirelessly for this company. I'm on the side of Anderson Construction. I always have been. That's why I can't sit here and pretend these concerns aren't valid when I know they are. Harold Jenkins nodded slowly. Robert, I think we should at least hear what Phoenix has to say. Due diligence requires we take such matters seriously. Several other board members murmured agreement. My father's jaw tightened, but he was too experienced a businessman to dismiss legitimate concerns in front of the board. Fine, he conceded. We'll meet with them, but I want our financial team to prepare a full response to these allegations beforehand. Ryan shot me a look of pure betrayal as the meeting continued with logistics for the Phoenix presentation. I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly suppressed by the reminder that he had accepted my father's favoritism without question for years. The RAW? Board meeting adjourned with the Phoenix presentation scheduled for the following week. As everyone filed out, my father caught my arm. My office, he said, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Once we were behind closed doors, he exploded. What the hell was that, Emma? You publicly undermined your brother in front of the entire board. I stated facts, Dad. Facts that everyone in that room already knows, but is too afraid to say aloud because you've made it clear that Ryan is untouchable. My father paced behind his desk. This isn't about Ryan's performance. This is about loyalty, family. You're giving ammunition to outsiders who want to take over our company. Is that what this is about? I asked quietly. Your pride? Because if you cared about the company's future, you'd be concerned about the issues I raised, not angry that I raised them. He stopped pacing to stare at me. You have no idea what it takes to build something like this, to make the hard decisions. I have every idea. I cut in, my own anger finally surfacing. I've been doing it alongside you for 20 years. I've made sacrifices, solved problems, built relationships. I've earned my place in this company in ways Ryan never has. My father's expression hardened. So that's what this is about. You're upset about the CEO decision. I'm upset about being overlooked and undervalued for my entire career, I corrected. I'm upset that you've never seen me as capable of leadership because I'm not your son. That's not fair, Emma. I've given you every opportunity. No, I interrupted again, beyond caring about respect or protocol now. You gave me the opportunities you thought appropriate for your daughter. The real opportunities, the ones that lead to advancement and influence, those you saved for Ryan. And now you've handed him control of a company he doesn't understand and isn't qualified to lead. My father's face flushed with anger. You're speaking from emotion, not reason. Ryan has been groomed for this position. He understands the big picture in ways you don't because you're too focused on details. I almost laughed at the absurdity. In what universe was attention to detail a leadership liability? The big picture is made up of details, Dad. Details like budgets and timelines and relationships with subcontractors. Details that Ryan consistently mishandles because he thinks they're beneath him. My father shook his head dismissively. You've always been jealous of your brother. I had hoped you'd grow out of it, but clearly, this isn't jealousy, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. This is recognition of a simple truth. You've made a mistake, and that mistake could cost this company everything you've built. My father stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, I think you should take some time off, Emma. Clearly, you're not in a position to support this transition constructively. It was effectively a suspension, a professional timeout, like I was a misbehaving child. I might have argued further, but this actually worked in my favor. It would give me freedom to work with James and prepare for the Phoenix presentation without the daily scrutiny of being in the office. Fine, I said coolly. I'll clear my calendar. The marketing team can manage without me for a week or two. I turned to leave, then added over my shoulder, I hope you take this time to actually read the Phoenix analysis. The company deserves that much from you. I left without waiting for his response. Outside the building, I called James immediately. They took the bait. Board meeting with Phoenix is scheduled for next week. And your father? He's put me on leave, which is perfect. I can work with you openly now. James sounded concerned. Are you all right, Emma? This can't be easy, confronting your family this way. I was surprised to feel tears welling in my eyes. I blinked them back quickly. I'm fine. This has been coming for years. I'm just finally doing something about it. But as I drove home to my Pearl District loft, I couldn't ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to earn my father's respect, to prove myself worthy of the Anderson legacy. Now I was actively challenging his judgment, threatening the very control he'd always held so tightly. It felt like burning down my own house to rebuild it. Necessary, but painful. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony. The Portland skyline glittered in the evening light, including several buildings Anderson Construction had helped create. I'd grown up watching this city transform, feeling proud to be part of a family that was literally building the future. Now I was fighting for my place in that future, and the fight was turning ugly. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Heard about the board meeting drama. You finally playing hardball? Drinks tonight? I smiled faintly. News traveled fast in Portland's business community. Can't tonight. Strategy session for next week. Rain check? Absolutely. Go get 'em, Tiger. I spent the next few days working closely with James, Diana, and Mark, refining our presentation for the board. We gathered additional evidence of Ryan's mismanagement, prepared responses to likely objections, and developed a revised acquisition proposal that would be difficult to dismiss. On the personal front, my mother called daily, her voice increasingly concerned as she tried to mediate the growing rift between me and my father. He's hurt, Emma, she said during one call. He doesn't understand why you're siding with outsiders against your own family. I'm not siding against the family, Mom, I explained patiently. I'm trying to protect the company from bad decisions. There's a difference. Your father built this company from nothing, she reminded me, as if I could have forgotten. He knows what he's doing. He knew what he was doing, I corrected gently. But the industry has changed. The old ways aren't working anymore, and Ryan isn't equipped to navigate the new landscape. She sighed heavily. Just promise me you'll be open to reconciliation. Family is what matters in the end, Emma. I promised, though I wasn't sure reconciliation was possible after what I was planning. The day of the Phoenix presentation arrived with a sense of inevitability. James picked me up in his Tesla, both of us dressed in our most professional attire. During the drive to Anderson Construction headquarters, he squeezed my hand supportively. "Ready for this?" he asked. I nodded. I've been ready for years. The boardroom was already full when we arrived. My father sat at the head of the table, Ryan to his right. I noticed several people I hadn't expected. Our primary banker, our insurance representative, even our largest client's project manager. My father had clearly decided to stack the deck with people who would support his position. James approached my father with outstretched hand. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for meeting with us. I'm James Carter, CEO of Phoenix Development Group." My father's expression hardened as recognition dawned. "Carter Architectural Innovations. You're our competitor." "Sometimes competitor, sometimes collaborator," James corrected smoothly. "Today, hopefully a partner." Ryan's eyes darted between James and me, confusion turning to suspicion. "You two know each other." I stepped forward. "James and I have worked together on several joint projects over the years. His firm has provided architectural services for Anderson Construction many times." My father's suspicion deepened. "And now he's trying to buy us out. Convenient timing." "Actually," James said, setting his briefcase on the table, "our interest is in partnership, not takeover. We believe Anderson Construction has tremendous potential that isn't being fully realized under the current management structure." Ryan scoffed. "And you think you could do better?" James smiled slightly. "Not me. Emma." The room went still. All eyes turned to me as James continued. "Phoenix Development Group is a joint venture. Emma Anderson is my partner and would become CEO of Anderson Construction under our proposal." My father's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You're behind this? My own daughter?" I met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I am, because you left me no choice." The next hour was among the most difficult of my life. Mark presented the financial analysis, showing in painstaking detail how projects under Ryan's management consistently underperformed compared to industry standards and previous Anderson Construction outcomes. Diana outlined the legal and reputation risks associated with several decisions Ryan had made, including the municipal center modifications that Teresa had warned me about. Throughout it all, my father sat rigid with fury, while Ryan alternated between defensiveness and disbelief. The rest of the board listened with growing concern, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed they recognized the accuracy of our assessment. Finally, James presented our acquisition proposal. Phoenix would purchase a controlling interest in Anderson Construction, with Emma Anderson assuming the role of CEO. My father would remain as chairman of the board for a 2-year transition period. Ryan would be offered a position as vice president of business development, leveraging his networking skills while removing him from operational decision-making. When the presentation concluded, Harold Jenkins was the first to speak. "I've been with this company for 35 years, he said slowly, looking around the table. "I've watched Emma grow up in this business, seen her dedication and competence firsthand. What she and Mr. Carter have presented today is troubling, but, unfortunately, not surprising to those of us who work closely with these projects. Several other executives nodded in agreement. My father noticed, and his expression darkened further. "This is a family matter that's been inappropriately brought before the board," he said firmly. "We'll need time to discuss privately before responding to this proposal." James gathered his materials. "Of course, we'll give you the room. But I should mention that several of your key clients and financial partners have expressed interest in our analysis. We've respected your right to hear this information first, but transparency may become necessary if we can't reach an agreement." It was a gentle threat, but a threat nonetheless. If Anderson Construction rejected our proposal, we were prepared to share our concerns with those who had the power to affect the company's future. Clients who might reconsider their contracts, banks that might reassess their lending terms. As James and his team left the room, I remained seated. This was the moment of truth. "You too, Emma," my father said coldly. "You've made your position clear. You're not welcome in this discussion." I looked around the table at the faces I'd known for years. People who had watched me grow up, who had worked alongside me, who knew my capabilities and commitment. "I'd like to stay," I said quietly. "Not as Phoenix's representative, but as someone who has dedicated her life to this company. Someone who deserves a voice in its future." Harold Jenkins nodded firmly. "I think that's appropriate. Emma is still an executive of this company, regardless of her outside affiliations." My father looked like he wanted to argue, but several other board members murmured agreement. With visible reluctance, he gestured for me to remain. What followed was the most honest conversation the Anderson Construction Board had ever had. Long-simmering concerns about Ryan's leadership were finally voiced openly. Projects that had been quietly rescued by other executives were discussed. The company's declining profit margins and increasing client complaints were acknowledged. Through it all, Ryan sat in stunned silence, while my father grew increasingly defensive. He accused the board of disloyalty, of failing to support his vision. But it was too late. The evidence was too compelling, the pattern too clear. Finally, Harold turned to me. "Emma, is there room for compromise here? A solution that preserves the Anderson family's control while addressing these legitimate concerns?" I had anticipated this question and prepared my answer carefully. Phoenix Development Group was created for one purpose: to ensure that Anderson Construction reaches its full potential under qualified leadership. If the board believes that can happen without an acquisition, I'm open to alternatives. My father narrowed his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been working toward for years. "I'm suggesting a restructuring. I become CEO with full operational authority. You remain as chairman of the board, providing guidance and maintaining our client relationships. Ryan takes a role better suited to his strengths, away from day-to-day operations." Ryan exploded. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to steal my position." "I'm trying to save this company," I corrected him firmly. "A company that means everything to me, that I've devoted my entire career to building and protecting." "By threatening us?" my father demanded. "By bringing in outsiders to expose what you see as our weaknesses?" "By forcing you to see the truth," I replied. "Because you refuse to see it any other way." Harold Jenkins leaned forward. "Robert, I've been your friend for 3 decades. I've never spoken against your decisions. But Emma is right. The company is at risk under the current structure, and we need to acknowledge that reality." One by one, the board members voiced their agreement. The evidence was simply too compelling to ignore. Even our banker cleared his throat uncomfortably and mentioned that their next review would need to address some of the concerns raised in our presentation. My father looked around the table, his face a mask of betrayal. For a moment, I thought he might simply walk out. Instead, he turned to me with cold fury. "You planned this. All of it. For how long? 5 years, I admitted. Since you made Ryan VP of Operations despite his lack of qualifications, despite my proven track record, since it became clear that no matter what I achieved, you would never see me as the rightful heir to this company. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or even respect, crossed his face before disappearing behind anger again. And James Carter? How does he factor into this coup? James recognizes my abilities, values my vision for this company's future. He was willing to invest in that vision when my own father wouldn't. The room fell silent as my father and I stared at each other across decades of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. Finally, Harold Jenkins spoke again. I move that we table this discussion until tomorrow. Emotions are running high, and we all need time to consider our options rationally. The board quickly agreed, and the meeting was adjourned. As people filed out, Ryan stormed past me without a word. My father remained seated, looking suddenly older than his years. "Dad," I said quietly when we were alone, "this wasn't how I wanted it to happen." He looked up, his expression weary. "Then why did you make it happen this way? Why the deception, the threats, the public humiliation?" "Because you didn't leave me any other choice," I answered honestly. "You never really saw me as capable of leading this company. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I was always just your daughter, never your successor." He shook his head slowly. "You have no idea the pressure, the responsibility of passing on a legacy like this. I built Anderson Construction from nothing. I couldn't risk its future on a woman?" I finished for him. "Even if that woman had proven herself 1,000 times over? Even if your son had consistently shown he wasn't ready?" My father had no answer for that. After a long moment, he gathered his papers and stood. "Tomorrow, Emma. We'll finish this tomorrow." As he walked out, I remained in the empty boardroom, surrounded by the artifacts of the company I loved. Blueprints of buildings we'd constructed, awards we'd won, photographs of completed projects that had transformed Portland's skyline. Whatever happened next, I had finally forced a reckoning. The truth was on the table at last. I left the Anderson Construction Building feeling strangely hollow. The confrontation I'd been planning for years had finally happened, but victory, if that's what it was, tasted different than I'd imagined. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Olivia. "So?" she asked without preamble. "How did it go?" "About as well as a corporate ambush can go," I replied, climbing into my car but not starting it. "The board is considering our proposal. We reconvene tomorrow. And your dad? Ryan?" I leaned my head back against the seat, suddenly exhausted. Dad looked like I'd betrayed him in the worst possible way. Ryan, angry, defensive, entitled. "Are you okay?" It was a simple question, but it nearly broke me. I swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in my throat. "I don't know. I did what I had to do, but it's still your family," Olivia finished gently. "Listen, come over. I've got wine and that terrible Thai food you love. You shouldn't be alone tonight." I accepted gratefully. An hour later, we were curled up on Olivia's couch, takeout containers spread across her coffee table, as I recounted every excruciating detail of the meeting. The look on my father's face when James revealed I was behind Phoenix, I said, swirling, the wine in my glass. I've disappointed him before, but this was different. It was like I became a stranger to him. Olivia topped off my glass. He made you a stranger in your own company for years, Emma. You fought back the only way you could. I know, but... No buts, she interrupted firmly. This isn't just about you anymore. Think about all the employees at Anderson whose jobs depend on competent leadership. Think about Teresa Guzman and other talented people who've been overlooked. Because of your father's outdated thinking, you're fighting for them too. She was right, of course. This wasn't just my personal vendetta. The company's future, and the livelihoods of everyone who worked there, was at stake. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Just heard from Harold Jenkins. Board wants to meet privately tomorrow morning before reconvening with us. Good sign. I showed Olivia the message. Harold's support means a lot. The others respect him. Which means your plan is working, Olivia pointed out. Now you just need to stay strong for the final push. I nodded, though staying strong felt increasingly difficult. I had set these events in motion, but I couldn't control how they would end. The next 24 hours would determine everything. I slept poorly that night, my dreams filled with fragmented images. My father's disappointed face, Ryan's anger, Harold Jenkins nodding in support. I woke early, feeling anything but rested, and took extra care with my appearance. Today I needed to project absolute confidence and competence. James picked me up at 9:30 for our 10 a.m. meeting. How are you? Holding up? He asked as we drove. I'm fine, I said automatically, then amended. Actually, that's not true. I feel terrible about how this is affecting my family, but I can't back down now. James nodded sympathetically. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Not just for yourself, but for Anderson Construction. The company needs your leadership, whether your father recognizes that or not. When we arrived at headquarters, the receptionist directed us not to the boardroom, but to my father's office. It was an unexpected change that set my nerves on edge. James and I exchanged concerned glances as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. My father was waiting alone, seated behind his massive desk. He gestured for us to sit without rising or offering to shake hands. His expression was unreadable. The board met this morning, he began without preamble. They've reached certain conclusions based on yesterday's presentation. I sat straighter, bracing myself for whatever came next. First, my father continued, they agree that Ryan lacks the necessary experience and judgment to serve as CEO at this time. I carefully kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced at this admission. Second, they acknowledge that you, Emma, have demonstrated the skills and commitment required for executive leadership. James shifted beside me, his knee briefly touching mine in silent support. And third, my father's voice hardened slightly, they find Phoenix Development Group's approach, specifically the implicit threat to share damaging information with our clients and partners, to be problematic from an ethical standpoint. Before I could respond, he raised a hand. However, they also recognize that this approach came after years of having legitimate concerns dismissed. The board has therefore authorized me to offer the following compromise. My father slid a document across the desk. I leaned forward to read it, James doing the same beside me. It was a draft board resolution outlining a new management structure. Emma Anderson would become Chief Executive Officer, with Robert Anderson transitioning to Executive Chairman. Ryan Anderson would be moved to Vice President of Client Relations, a role that leveraged his social skills while removing him from operational decisions. The Phoenix acquisition offer would be declined, with Phoenix's investment redirected into a formal partnership between Anderson Construction and Carter Architectural Innovations. I read the document twice, hardly believing what I was seeing. It was essentially what I had asked for, without the hostile takeover component. This is contingent on two conditions, my father added, his voice carefully controlled. First, all evidence of mismanagement gathered by Phoenix must be turned over to the board and then destroyed, with no copies retained. Second, James Carter must agree to a non-competition clause that prevents him from using any proprietary information gained through this process. James nodded thoughtfully. Those terms seem reasonable, provided we formalize the partnership between our firms. I have no interest in harming Anderson Construction, quite the opposite. My father turned his gaze to me, his eyes challenging. And you, Emma? Is this what you wanted? I chose my words carefully. It's not about what I want, Dad. It's about what's best for the company. This structure addresses the legitimate concerns I raised while preserving the Anderson family's control. I paused, then added quietly, "It's what should have happened naturally, if you had been able to see my potential." My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't dispute my assessment. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a second document, a formal letter offering me the position of Chief Executive Officer of Anderson Construction and Development. "The board has already approved this," he said, sliding it across to me. "It's ready for your signature." I stared at the letter, emotions washing over me in waves. This moment, seeing my name and the CEO title together on official company letterhead, was one I had dreamed about for years. Yet the circumstances made it bittersweet. "What about Ryan?" I asked. "Does he know?" Something like pain crossed my father's face. Yes, he was. Upset. He's taken a few days off to process the change. I imagined my brother's reaction, the shock, the anger, the humiliation. Despite our differences, I took no pleasure in his disappointment. "I'll speak with him when he's ready," I said. "This isn't about replacing him. It's about putting everyone in positions where they can succeed." My father nodded curtly, clearly unconvinced. "The board will convene at 2 p.m. to formalize these decisions, assuming you accept the offer." I glanced at James, who gave me an encouraging nod. Then I picked up a pen from my father's desk and signed the letter. 20 years of work, of proving myself over and over had led to this moment. I was finally where I belonged. "Congratulations," my father said, his tone formal and distant. "I'll see you at the board meeting." It was a dismissal. James and I stood to leave, but at the door, I turned back. "Dad?" "Not now, Emma," he cut me off. "We have a company to run." The board meeting that afternoon was brief and businesslike. The resolutions were passed unanimously, with me abstaining on the vote regarding my own appointment. My father announced that we would inform the company of the leadership changes the following morning. As the meeting adjourned, board members offered congratulations, some more enthusiastic than others. Harold Jenkins embraced me warmly. "You earned this," he said quietly. "Never doubt that." Outside the boardroom, James waited with Diana and Mark. When I emerged, they broke into applause. "Congratulations, CEO Anderson," James said, shaking my hand formally before pulling me into a quick hug. "I knew you could do it." "We did. It together," I corrected. "I couldn't have pulled this off without you." Diana handed me a small gift bag. "A token to celebrate the occasion," she explained. Inside was a sleek Mont Blanc pen engraved with my initials and CEO. "For signing all those important documents in your new role," Mark added with a smile. I was touched by the gesture. These people had believed in me when my own family hadn't. They had risked their professional reputations to help me claim my rightful place. "Thank you," I said, suddenly emotional. "For everything." James squeezed my shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Emma. Now the real work starts." He was right. I had fought for this position, and now I had to prove I deserved it. I had to transform Anderson Construction into the company I knew it could be. Innovative, forward-thinking, inclusive. And I had to do it while healing the rifts this battle had created in my family. That evening, I called my mother. She'd been conspicuously absent from the day's events, and I needed to hear her voice. "I know already," she said when I started to explain what had happened. "Your father called me." "Are you angry with me?" I asked, feeling suddenly like a little girl again, seeking her mother's approval. She sighed heavily. "I'm disappointed in how this played out, Emma. This kind of public confrontation isn't how our family handles things." "But the outcome?" I pressed. "Do you think it's right?" There was a long pause before she answered. I've watched you work twice as hard as Ryan for half the recognition your entire life. So yes, I think it's right that you're finally being acknowledged for your contributions." Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I just wish it hadn't come at such a cost." "I tried other ways, Mom. For years, I tried." "I know you did. Your father, he's a product of his generation. Change doesn't come easily to him." She paused again. "Give him time, Emma. This is hard for him in ways you might not understand." I promised I would, though reconciliation seemed a distant prospect given my father's cold demeanor. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony with a glass of champagne, watching the city lights come on across Portland. Tomorrow, I would walk into Anderson Construction as its CEO. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Drinks tomorrow night to celebrate. No excuses." I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Then I noticed another message that had come in while I was talking to my mother. It was from Teresa Guzman. "Just heard the news. It's about time. Looking forward to working with you as CEO." That simple message of support meant more than Teresa could know. It reminded me that this victory wasn't just for me. It was for every person at Anderson Construction who deserved better leadership, who needed an advocate in the executive suite. The next morning, I dressed in a power suit, took a deep breath, and drove to the office earlier than usual. I wanted time to gather my thoughts before the company-wide announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed my father's car already there. So much for having the space to myself. I took the elevator to the executive floor, nodding to the few early arrivers I passed in the hallway. When I reached my office, still the marketing director's office until facilities could arrange the move to the CEO suite, I found a small package on my desk with my name handwritten on the front. Inside was a set of keys and a handwritten note in my father's distinctive scrawl. "These belong to you now. The corner office is ready when you are." My throat tightened unexpectedly. This was the closest thing to acceptance I was likely to get from him, at least for now. I picked up the keys and walked down the hallway to the CEO's office. My office now. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found my father removing the last of his personal items from the desk drawers. He looked up when I entered, his expression guarded. "I've cleared most of my things. The files are organized in the cabinet by project type and year." "Thank you," I said, setting the keys on the desk. The same massive oak desk I'd colored on as a child while my father worked on blueprints. An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, my father spoke again. "The office has a good view of Mount Hood on clear days. I always found it helped put things in perspective when dealing with difficult decisions." I moved to the window, looking out at the panoramic view of the city with the mountain rising majestically in the distance. "It's beautiful," I agreed. Another silence fell. "Dad," I began hesitantly, "I know this isn't how you wanted things to happen." "No," he cut me off, his voice firm but not unkind. "It wasn't. But perhaps it's how they needed to happen." He closed the drawer he'd been emptying and straightened up. "You fought for this, Emma. You used every resource at your disposal. You outmaneuvered me, something few people have ever done." His expression softened slightly. "Your grandfather would have approved of your tenacity, if not your methods." Coming from my father, this was high praise indeed. I felt a small crack forming in the wall between us. "I learned from watching you," I said quietly. "You taught me to never give up on something I believe in." He nodded once, acknowledging the point. "The company announcement is in 30 minutes. We should present a united front." Agreed. He moved toward the door, then paused. "One piece of advice, if you'll take it." "Of course. Ryan will need time," but don't write him off completely. He has talents that can benefit this company, even if leadership isn't among them." I nodded. "I know. I'm not looking to push him out, Dad. I just need him in a role where he can succeed without putting the company at risk." My father studied me for a moment, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "You'll be a good CEO, Emma. Different from me, but good." With that, he walked out, leaving me alone in what was now my office. I moved behind the desk and sat in the large leather chair, running my hands over the smooth wood surface. How many decisions had been made at this desk? How many projects launched, deals signed, careers advanced or ended? And now it was my turn. The company-wide meeting was held in the large atrium on the ground floor. By 8:55, nearly every employee had gathered, the buzz of speculation filling the space. At precisely 9 a.m., my father stepped onto the small platform that had been set up, with me at his side. The room quieted immediately. "Good morning," my father began, his voice carrying, clearly through the space. "Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, I recently announced my intention to step down as CEO and appoint my son Ryan as my successor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people noticed Ryan's absence from the platform. "After careful consideration and consultation with our board of directors, that plan has changed," my father continued. "Effective immediately, I will be transitioning to the role of executive chairman, focusing on client relationships and strategic guidance." He paused, turning slightly toward me. "It is my privilege to introduce Anderson Construction's new chief executive officer, my daughter, Emma Anderson." Applause broke out, noticeably enthusiastic from several sections of the crowd. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon me. "Thank you," I said, waiting for the applause to subside. "I am honored and humbled to accept this responsibility. For 20 years, I have worked alongside many of you, learning from your expertise, sharing in our successes, and finding solutions to our challenges." I looked out at the sea of faces: project managers, architects, engineers, administrative staff, laborers in from job sites for the announcement. These were the people who built Anderson Construction, who made our vision reality every day. "Construction is an industry built on solid foundations," I continued. "My grandfather started this company with nothing but determination and skill. My father transformed it into one of the Northwest's premier firms. Now it's our turn to build the next phase together." I outlined my vision briefly, expanding into sustainable construction, investing in new technologies, creating clearer paths for advancement based on merit rather than connections. As I spoke, I could see nods of approval, particularly from younger employees and those who had been with the company long enough to recognize the need for change. "Change can be difficult," I acknowledged, "but it's also necessary for growth. I'm asking each of you to bring your ideas, your concerns, and your commitment as we move forward together. My door will always be open." As the meeting concluded and employees dispersed to start their day, many stopped to offer congratulations or words of support. Teresa Guzman gave me a quick, fierce hug. "About damn time," she whispered before pulling back to a more professional distance. Harold Jenkins stood nearby, beaming like a proud uncle. By mid-morning, I was settled into the CEO's office, reviewing the transition documents my father had prepared. There was a knock at my door, and my assistant, formerly my father's assistant, appeared. "Mr. Carter is here to see you," she announced. "And there's a call from the Portland Business Journal requesting an interview about the leadership change." I smiled. "Send James in and tell the Journal I'll call them back this afternoon." She nodded and withdrew. James entered a moment later carrying a small plant. "Office warming gift," he explained, setting it on a side table. "It's supposed to be impossible to kill, which seemed appropriate for your first day as CEO." I laughed, thinking I might need something resilient. Always good to have reminders that life persists even under challenging conditions. He glanced around the office. So, how does it feel to be on this side of the desk? I considered the question seriously. Surreal. Overwhelming. Right. James nodded. All appropriate responses. He sat in one of the visitor chairs. I've been thinking about our partnership agreement. I have some ideas for the first joint project that I think you'll like. As he began outlining his thoughts, I felt a surge of excitement about the future. This was what I had fought for. Not just the title, but the opportunity to lead Anderson Construction in new directions, to work with innovative partners like James, to create something lasting. My phone buzzed with a text. I expected it to be Olivia confirming our celebration drinks, but instead, it was from Ryan. We need to talk. Dinner tonight? I showed James the message. What do you think? Too soon? He considered it thoughtfully. Probably, but necessary. Family wounds fester when left unaddressed. I texted back a quick agreement, suggesting a neutral restaurant rather than our family home. Ryan's response came immediately. 7 p.m. at Riverside Grill. Part of me dreaded the conversation to come, but another part welcomed the chance to begin healing the rift with my brother. For all our differences, he was still family. And despite what my father believed, I hadn't done this to hurt Ryan. I had done it because Anderson Construction deserved the best possible leadership. As James and I returned to discussing potential projects, my father passed by the open door, pausing briefly to look in. Our eyes met, and he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod before continuing on his way. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. The day continued in a whirlwind of meetings, congratulatory calls, and the 1,000 small details involved in a leadership transition. By late afternoon, I had conducted interviews with the Portland Business Journal and the construction industry's regional publication, approved a company-wide email detailing upcoming changes, and begun meetings with each department head to assess immediate needs and concerns. Throughout it all, I kept thinking about my dinner with Ryan. What would he say? Would he be angry, conciliatory, or something in between? We had never been close. The age gap and our father's obvious favoritism had seen to that. But we weren't enemies either. At least we hadn't been until now. At 6:45, I left the office and drove to Riverside Grill, a upscale restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. Ryan was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a glass of scotch in front of him. He didn't stand when I approached, but he wasn't openly hostile either. "You look like a CEO," he said as I sat down, his tone somewhere between sarcastic and sincere. "Thank you, I think," I replied carefully. "How are you doing, Ryan?" He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "How do you think? Yesterday I was the future of Anderson Construction. Today I'm being shuffled off to a glorified PR role." The waiter approached, and I ordered a glass of white wine, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the tension. When he left, I leaned forward. "Client relations isn't a punishment, Ryan. It's actually where your strengths lie. You're good with people. You make connections easily. Those skills are valuable." Ryan scoffed. "Don't patronize me, Emma. We both know what happened. You weren't willing to accept Dad's decision, so you orchestrated this whole silent partner scheme to force his hand." I took a breath, reminding myself that his anger was understandable. "You're right that I wasn't willing to accept his decision, but not for the reasons you think. This wasn't about me versus you. It was about what's best for the company. And naturally, you decided that was you." "Not alone," I corrected. The board agreed. Even Dad eventually acknowledged it, though I know it was difficult for him. Ryan drained his scotch and signaled for another. "You know what the worst part is? Everyone's acting like this was inevitable, like they always knew you were more qualified, like I never had a chance." There was hurt beneath the anger in his voice, and it touched me unexpectedly. Ryan had been set up to fail, placed in positions he wasn't prepared for, given responsibilities he hadn't earned, all because our father couldn't see past traditional ideas of succession. "I'm sorry it happened this way," I said, and meant it. "But Ryan, consider this. In your new role, you'll be judged on your actual strengths, not measured against standards that don't fit your talents. That's a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right now." He looked skeptical, but something in my words seemed to register. Before he could respond, the waiter returned with our drinks and took our dinner orders. When he left, Ryan studied me with new intensity. "You really believe you can turn the company around? Fix all these problems you claim I created?" I sipped my wine. "I know I can improve things, not alone. I'll need help from the entire team, including you. But yes, I believe in my vision for Anderson Construction." "Which is what exactly? More sustainable buildings? Virtual reality walkthroughs? All the stuff Dad always dismissed as trends?" "Some of that," I acknowledged. "But more fundamentally, a shift in how we operate. Merit-based advancement, collaborative decision-making, investment in new technologies that will keep us competitive for the next 20 years. I paused. "The construction industry is changing, Ryan. We can lead that change or be left behind." For the first time, I saw genuine interest flicker in his eyes. "And this partnership with Carter Architectural Innovations? How does that fit in?" I explained the joint venture we were planning, a project combining Anderson's construction expertise with Carter's cutting-edge architectural approach, specifically targeting clients interested in sustainable commercial buildings. "The market for green construction is expanding rapidly," I concluded. "We're positioned to become leaders in that space if we move quickly." Ryan nodded slowly, his second scotch forgotten. "That actually makes sense. We've been losing bids to firms with better sustainability credentials." "Exactly. And with your network of contacts, you could identify potential clients who might be interested in this new direction?" He gave me a sharp look. "So you really do see a role for me in all this? It's not just a consolation prize." "I meant what I said, Ryan. You have valuable skills. They're just different from mine." Our food arrived, and as we ate, the conversation gradually shifted to more neutral territory. Industry gossip, memories of projects we'd worked on, even a few cautious jokes. By dessert, the worst of the tension had dissipated. We weren't magically healed, but we had found a tentative path forward. As we waited for the check, Ryan asked the question I'd been dreading. "What about Dad? How are things between you two?" I sighed. "Complicated. He's professional, but distant. I think it will take time for him to accept that I outmaneuvered him." Ryan actually smiled slightly at that. "You know, in a weird way, he probably respects it. He's always valued strategic thinking." He shook his head. "I never had that killer instinct. Maybe he knew that all along." "Maybe," I agreed, though I suspected our father's reasons were more about gender than temperament. "Either way, we all have to find a new normal now." Ryan nodded, suddenly serious again. "For what it's worth, I'm not going to sabotage you, Emma. I'm disappointed, sure, but I'm not out to undermine the company. It's still Anderson Construction. It's still our legacy." It was the most conciliatory thing he'd said all evening. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Thank you. That means a lot." As we walked to our cars afterward, Ryan paused. "Good luck, CEO Anderson. I have a feeling you're going to need it." I smiled. "Probably, but I've been preparing for this my entire life. I'm ready." Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The confrontation I dreaded had turned into something approaching reconciliation. Ryan wasn't thrilled with the new arrangement, but he was accepting it with more grace than I'd expected. As for my father, time would tell. But I had faith that eventually, He would see that this outcome was best for everyone, including him. At home, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a small celebratory nightcap. My phone pinged with a text from James. "First day as CEO complete. How does it feel?" I smiled and typed back, "Like the beginning of something important." And it was. After 20 years of being overlooked, of watching my ideas appropriated and my contributions minimized, I had finally claimed my rightful place. Anderson Construction was under my leadership now, and I intended to make the most of this opportunity, not just for myself, but for everyone who believed in what the company could become. My father had given the family business to my younger brother, never knowing about my silent partner agreement. He hadn't seen me coming. But now, looking out at the Portland skyline from my balcony, I could see our future clearly. Stronger, more innovative, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing but excitement about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, I arrived at the office just after 7, eager to continue the momentum of my first day as CEO. The early hour meant the building was mostly empty, which gave me precious quiet time to organize my thoughts and priorities. I had already drafted a 90-day plan, but implementing it would require careful sequencing and clear communication. I set my bag down in what still felt like my father's office, despite the nameplate on the door now reading Emma Anderson, Chief Executive Officer. The space needed my own touch, perhaps some contemporary art to replace the hunting prints my father had favored, definitely more plants like the one James had given me. But those cosmetic changes could wait. Today was about substance. I began by reviewing the company's current project roster. Anderson Construction had 12 major projects underway, 4 in the bidding stage, and 3 in preliminary discussions. The municipal center renovation remained our highest profile undertaking, the one that would either enhance or damage our reputation depending on its execution. Teresa had flagged serious concerns about Ryan's modifications to the project approach. Addressing those would be my first priority. I sent her a message requesting a detailed review meeting later that morning. If we needed to course correct, better to do it immediately rather than allow problems to compound. By 8 o'clock, the office was coming alive with the day's activities. My assistant, Marion, arrived with coffee and a stack of documents requiring my signature. "The board minutes from yesterday need your approval," she explained, "and there are several contract amendments that were pending your father's review." I took the coffee gratefully. "Thanks, Marion. Also, could you arrange a lunch meeting with Harold Jenkins today? I'd like his perspective on a few matters." "Already on your calendar for noon," she replied with a small smile. "Mr. Jenkins requested it yesterday." I nodded appreciatively. Marion had been my father's assistant for 15 years, and I had worried she might resist the transition. Instead, she seemed determined to make it as smooth as possible. Another ally I hadn't fully anticipated. At 9, I conducted my first executive team meeting as CEO. The atmosphere was noticeably different from previous meetings, more attentive, perhaps even slightly anxious. These were people who had watched me grow up in the company, who had reported to my father for years. Now they were looking to me for direction. "Good morning, everyone," I began, looking around the table at the familiar faces. "First, I want to thank you all for your professionalism during this transition. Change can be unsettling, but it also brings opportunity." I outlined my immediate priorities, a comprehensive review of all current projects, particularly those flagged with budget or timeline concerns, a detailed assessment of our technological infrastructure, and the development of our partnership with Carter Architectural Innovations. "Questions at this stage?" I asked after finishing my overview. Our Chief Financial Officer, Martin Wells, cleared his throat. "What about the organizational structure? Will there be additional changes to the executive team?" It was the question everyone was wondering, but no one had been brave enough to ask directly. Would I clean house, replacing my father's longtime allies with my own people? "No immediate changes," I assured them. My goal is stability while we address our most pressing challenges. That said, I do intend to create a new position, Chief Innovation Officer, who will oversee our technological advancement and sustainability initiatives. I'll be conducting a search for the right candidate over the next month. This news was received with nods of approval. Innovation had been a persistent gap in our executive structure, with technology decisions often made piecemeal by different departments without coordination. One more thing, I added. I've scheduled individual meetings with each of you over the next week. I want to understand your perspectives on our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. Be candid. I need your honest assessments, not what you think I want to hear. The meeting concluded with a sense of cautious optimism. As people filed out, I noticed Harold Jenkins lingering behind. "Good start," he said once we were alone. "You set the right tone, confident, but not disruptive." "Thanks, Harold. I'm looking forward to our lunch. I have questions only you can answer." He nodded. "I figured you might. 30 years watching this company grow gives me a certain perspective." He paused, then added, "Have you heard from your father this morning?" "No," I admitted. I wasn't really expecting to. Harold's expression was sympathetic. "Give him time, Emma. Robert Anderson doesn't adjust quickly to having his plans altered." "I know," I sighed. "I just hope he eventually sees that this is for the best." "He will," Harold assured me. "Results speak for themselves in this business." After Harold left, I spent an hour reviewing the Municipal Center project documentation. The changes Ryan had approved were even more problematic than Teresa had suggested. Not only did they risk violating historical preservation requirements, but they would also likely increase long-term maintenance costs for the city, something our bid had specifically promised to avoid. When Teresa arrived for our meeting, I got straight to the point. "The modified approach won't work. We need to revert to the original structural plan." Teresa visibly relaxed. "I've been arguing that for weeks. Ryan insisted the changes would save money without compromising quality." "They might save money initially," I acknowledged, "but they'd create problems down the line. Not to mention, potentially violating our contract terms." "So, I have your authorization to implement the original plans?" "Yes, immediately. And Teresa, document everything carefully. If the city asks questions, we need to show we identified and corrected the issue proactively." She nodded, clearly pleased with the direction. "This is why people wanted you in charge, Emma. You understand that our reputation depends on doing things right, not just fast or cheap." Her candid support was heartening. "Speaking of doing things right," I continued, "I'm creating a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer. I'd like your input on the role and potential candidates." Teresa's eyes widened slightly. "That's a significant step. Your father always handled innovation decisions personally." "And we fell behind as a result," I pointed out. "The industry is changing rapidly. We need someone focused specifically on keeping us ahead of those changes." "James Carter would be the obvious choice," she suggested tentatively. I shook my head. "James will be a key partner, but not an employee. I want someone who brings a fresh perspective without historical baggage." I paused. "Actually, I was thinking you might have recommendations from your network. You've always stayed connected to the latest industry developments." Teresa looked surprised, then pleased at the recognition. "I do know several people who might be interesting candidates. I'll put together some suggestions." After Teresa left, my morning continued with a parade of meetings, phone calls, and decisions both minor and significant. By noon, I was more than ready for my lunch with Harold, which we took at a small bistro a block from the office. "So," he said once we had ordered, 24 hours as CEO. What's been the biggest surprise?" I considered the question carefully. "How quickly people adapt." Yesterday, I was marketing director. Today, executives who've known me since I was a teenager are looking to me for leadership without hesitation. Harold nodded. That's the power of the position. The title matters in corporate culture, perhaps more than it should. Which is why my father couldn't see me in this role, I suggested. He couldn't separate Emma, his daughter, from Emma, the executive. Partly, Harold agreed. But there's more to it than that. Your father built Anderson Construction in a different era, with different values. Success to him looks like what he achieved, not what you might achieve in your own way. I took a sip of water, mulling over his words. What I really need to know, Harold, is where the landmines are. What problems did my father know about that might not be in the official records? What relationships are more fragile than they appear? Harold's expression turned serious. Perceptive question. There are a few situations you should be aware of. He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. The Westridge Development Project has issues beyond what's in the reports. The soil testing showed potential contamination, but your father decided to proceed while seeking additional opinions. Nothing definitive, but a risk factor that's been downplayed. Why would he take that chance? I asked, concerned. Contaminated. Soil could lead to massive remediation costs and delays. The relationship with Westridge's owner, Philip Kincaid, goes back 30 years. They were determined to break ground by year-end for tax purposes, and your father didn't want to be the one to derail that timeline. I made a mental note to order new, comprehensive soil testing immediately. What else? The Harrison Hotel. Renovation. The historical preservation requirements are more complex than the current plans acknowledge. We need specialized craftspeople for certain elements that can't be replicated with modern techniques. Your father was hoping to negotiate exceptions, but the Historical Society is unlikely to budge. We spent the next hour with Harold sharing insider knowledge about projects, clients, and key relationships that wouldn't be found in any official documentation. It was exactly what I needed, the kind of institutional memory that could help me avoid unnecessary pitfalls. As our lunch concluded, Harold hesitated, then said, "There's one more thing you should know, Emma. It's about your brother." I tensed slightly. What about Ryan? He came to see me this morning, asking for my support in a new initiative he wants to pursue, a specialized division focused on luxury residential construction. This was unexpected. Ryan hadn't mentioned any such plans during our dinner. What did you tell him? That any new initiatives would need your approval as CEO. Harold studied my reaction. It's actually not a bad idea. Ryan has connections with high-net-worth individuals who might be interested in custom homes. It would be a new market for Anderson, potentially lucrative. I considered this information. Was this Ryan accepting his new role and looking for ways to contribute meaningfully? Or was it an attempt to carve out territory beyond my oversight? I'll discuss it with him, I promised. And Harold, thank you for this and for your support during the transition. It means more than I can say. He smiled warmly. Your grandfather gave me my first job in construction when no one else would take a chance on a kid with no experience. I've always believed in the Anderson family vision. That includes you, Emma. Back at the office, I had just settled in to review the Harrison Hotel documentation when Marion appeared at my door. Your father is here to see you. My heart rate kicked up a notch. Send him in. My father entered, looking slightly uncomfortable in the space that had been his domain for so long. I gestured to a chair. Dad, this is a pleasant surprise. He sat stiffly. I've been meeting with the Westridge development team. Philip Kincaid asked specifically about the leadership transition. And what did you tell him? I asked carefully. The truth, that Anderson Construction is in capable hands. He cleared his throat. Philip would like to meet you personally. He's cautious about changes that might affect his project. I nodded, understanding the subtext. Philip Kincaid was testing whether my father still held the real influence or if he needed to establish a relationship with me directly. I'll arrange a dinner with him next week, I said. Will you join us? My father looked slightly surprised at the invitation. If you think it would help. It would. Transitions work best when they're collaborative, not competitive. He studied me for a moment, perhaps recognizing his own business philosophy reflected back at him. Yes, they do. He paused, then added, Harold tells me you're considering a luxury residential division with Ryan at the helm. News traveled. Fast. Ryan hasn't discussed it with me directly yet, but I'm open to the concept if it makes business sense. My father nodded slowly. It might. The margins are better than commercial work if you have the right clients. He hesitated, then continued. Ryan needs a win, Emma. Something he can call his own. I understood what he was asking. I'm not opposed to giving him that opportunity, Dad, but it has to be structured properly with appropriate oversight. Of course. He stood, apparently having accomplished his purpose. One more thing. Your mother would like you to come to dinner. On Sunday. Family tradition, she says. The Sunday family dinner had been a fixture of my childhood and early adult years, but I had gradually attended less frequently as the dynamics with Ryan grew more strained. The invitation was my mother's way of trying to normalize our new reality. I'll be there, I promised. After my father left, I sat for a moment, processing the interaction. It hadn't been warm exactly, but it was professional and forward-looking. Progress, of a sort. The afternoon continued with a series of decisions and meetings that reinforced my new reality as CEO. I authorized the revised approach to the municipal center renovation, initiated the search for specialized craftspeople for the Harrison Hotel project, and ordered new environmental testing for the West Ridge development site. By late afternoon, I was reviewing candidates for the Chief Innovation Officer position when Ryan appeared at my door. Unlike our father, he didn't wait to be invited in. I hear you met with Teresa Guzman this morning, he said without preamble. I set down the resume I'd been reading. Yes, about the Municipal Center project. We're reverting to the original structural approach. Ryan's jaw tightened. You're undoing my decisions on your first full day? That's a bit obvious, don't you? Think? I kept my voice calm. I'm addressing a legitimate concern that could have significant consequences for the company. It's not personal, Ryan. It feels personal, he countered, dropping into a chair. Everything I worked on is suddenly being scrutinized and revised. Not everything, I corrected. Just the elements that pose unnecessary risks. That's my job now. He looked away, frustration evident in his posture. After a moment, he seemed to gather himself. Harold probably told you about my idea for a luxury residential division. He mentioned it. I think it has potential. Ryan looked surprised at my positive response. You do? Yes, if it's structured properly. We'd need to be selective about which projects we take on, establish clear parameters for success, and ensure we have the specialized skills required for high-end residential work. I've already started developing a business plan, Ryan said, his tone shifting from defensive to cautiously enthusiastic. I have connections with several technology executives who are looking to build custom homes in the area. That's an excellent start, I encouraged. Draft a formal proposal and we'll discuss it next week. If it makes business sense, I'm all for exploring new markets. Ryan studied me, seemingly trying to determine if my support was genuine or merely a conciliatory gesture. I thought you'd dismiss it out of hand. Why would I do that? I asked. It's a legitimate business opportunity that leverages your specific strengths. That's exactly the kind of initiative I want to encourage. Huh, was all he said, but I could see wheels turning behind his eyes. Perhaps for the first time, he was considering that my leadership might actually create opportunities for him, rather than limitations. Was there anything else? I prompted when he remained seated. Mom mentioned Sunday dinner, he said. Are you coming? Yes, I told Dad I would be there. Ryan nodded. Good. It would mean a lot to her. This hasn't been easy for anyone, you know. It was perhaps the closest he'd come to acknowledging the family strain caused by recent events. "I know," I said softly, "but we'll figure it out. We're still family." After Ryan left, I turned my attention to preparing for my meeting with James the following morning. We needed to formalize our partnership now that the acquisition approach had been shelved. As I reviewed the draft agreement, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for his support. Without James's belief in my capabilities and his willingness to back that belief with resources, I might never have claimed my rightful position. I sent him a quick text. "Partnership agreement looks good. Minor revisions to discuss tomorrow. Thank you again for everything." His response came moments later. "You did the hard part. I just provided the platform. Proud of you, CEO Anderson." By 6 o'clock, I had cleared the most urgent items from my desk and was preparing to leave when Marion appeared with one last document requiring my signature, the official SEC filing, acknowledging the leadership change at Anderson Construction. As I signed my name, the weight of responsibility settled more fully on my shoulders. This wasn't just about claiming my deserved position or proving my father wrong. It was about leading a company that employed hundreds of people, contributed to the physical landscape of our city, and carried my family's legacy. I thought back to those earliest memories, sitting on my father's desk, coloring while he worked, on blueprints. "One day, all of this will be part of your world," he had told me. And now it was, though not in the way either of us had envisioned. The next morning, I met James at his office to finalize our partnership agreement. Carter Architectural Innovations occupied a modern space that reflected James's forward-thinking approach: open plan, abundant natural light, and sustainable materials throughout. "Welcome to the CEO Club," he greeted me with a warm smile. "How's the view from the corner office?" "Challenging, but exhilarating," I admitted. "I've already identified several issues that need immediate attention." "Not surprised," James said as he led me to his conference room. "Your brother's approach was, let's say, less detail-oriented than yours." We spent the next hour reviewing the partnership agreement, making minor adjustments to ensure both companies' interests were protected while creating a framework for collaboration. The first joint project would be a proposal for a sustainable office complex on Portland's east side, combining Carter's innovative architectural approach with Anderson's construction expertise. "This gives us both what we want," James observed as we concluded our discussion. "You get the leadership role you deserve. I get access to Anderson's construction capabilities without a hostile takeover. Win-win." And Anderson Construction gets a path to modernization without the trauma of an acquisition, I added. "My father may not see it that way yet, but he will eventually." James studied me thoughtfully. "Have you considered that he might never fully accept this outcome? Some people, especially successful ones, struggle to admit when they've been outmaneuvered." It was a possibility I'd tried not to dwell on. If that happens, I'll have to accept it. But I believe that once he sees the results, improved project outcomes, increased profitability, new market opportunities, professional pride will overcome personal disappointment. "I hope you're right," James said, though his tone suggested skepticism. "In my experience, family businesses rarely separate the professional from the personal completely." As I drove back to Anderson Construction, I reflected on James's warning. Was I being naive about the possibility of reconciliation with my father? Perhaps. But I had to believe that our shared commitment to the company's success would eventually bridge the gap created by recent events. The rest of the week passed in a blur of decisions, meetings, and gradual adjustments to my new role. I instituted weekly project review sessions, began the formal search for a chief innovation officer, and approved the preliminary research for Ryan's luxury residential division concept. On Sunday evening, I arrived at my parents' Lake Oswego home with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The familiar drive up the winding driveway brought back memories of countless family dinners. Some pleasant, others tense with unspoken competition and my father's assessments of our respective contributions to the company. My mother greeted me at the door with a warm embrace. "There she is," she said, pulling back to study my face. "How's my CEO daughter holding up?" "Busy but good," I assured her. "Is everyone here already?" "Your father's in his study. Ryan's on the deck." She lowered her voice slightly. "They've both been on their best behavior. Let's keep it that way, shall we?" I nodded, understanding her plea for a peaceful evening. "I'll do my part." In the kitchen, I helped my mother put the finishing touches on dinner, a family tradition that predated my corporate ambitions. As we worked side by side, she casually mentioned, "Your father told me about the Westridge development issues. He said you ordered new environmental testing." "Yes, it seemed prudent given the preliminary findings." She nodded. "He agreed with your decision, you know. He mentioned it was exactly what he was planning to do after getting additional data." I looked at her skeptically. "Really? Because—" Harold indicated Dad was trying to avoid delays for Philip Kincaid's sake. My mother smiled knowingly. "Your father likes people to think he makes decisions based purely on business relationships. The truth is he's more cautious than he appears. He just doesn't like to show that caution publicly." It was an interesting insight into my father's approach, one that suggested our management styles might not be as different as I had assumed. Dinner itself was surprisingly cordial. My father asked specific questions about my first week as CEO, actually listening to my responses rather than dismissing them. Ryan shared progress on his luxury residential division concept, receiving thoughtful feedback from both of us. My mother skillfully steered the conversation toward neutral topics whenever tension threatened to emerge. As we moved to the living room for coffee, my father unexpectedly broached a subject I hadn't anticipated. "I spoke with Bill Henderson at First Portland Bank yesterday," he said casually. "They're interested in financing our joint venture with Carter Architectural Innovations." I set down my coffee cup. "That's the first I'm hearing of it. James and I have been exploring financing options, but we haven't approached any banks formally yet." My father shrugged slightly. "Bill and I go back 30 years. He called to congratulate me on my transition to executive chairman and asked about future projects. I mentioned the partnership, and he expressed interest. I wasn't sure how to feel about this intervention. On one hand, securing favorable financing was positive. On the other, my father had bypassed me to discuss a project that was under my purview as CEO. "That's helpful," I said carefully. "But in the future, I'd appreciate if financial discussions about current projects went through proper channels." My father's expression tightened slightly. "Proper channels? You mean you?" "Yes," I said evenly. "As CEO, I need to be aware of all significant financial discussions affecting the company." A tense silence fell over the room. My mother shot me a warning glance, while Ryan watched the exchange with barely concealed interest. After a moment, my father nodded curtly. "Of course, I was simply utilizing an existing relationship to our advantage. But I understand the need for proper protocols." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of the new power dynamic. Progress, however uncomfortable. As I drove home later that evening, I reflected on the delicate balance I needed to maintain, asserting my authority as CEO while honoring my father's experience and connections. The transition would take time, with occasional missteps on both sides. The important thing was that we all seemed committed to making it work, however imperfectly. Monday morning brought a new week and fresh challenges. The environmental testing at the Westridge development site had revealed more significant contamination than initially reported. The municipal center project team was encountering resistance from city officials about reversing Ryan's modifications. And a potential client for our first joint venture with Carter Architectural Innovations was requesting an accelerated proposal timeline, As I worked through these issues, I received an unexpected visitor, Harold Jenkins, looking unusually solemn. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, closing my office door behind him. "Of course. What's up?" Harold sat heavily in the visitor's chair. "I've just come from a meeting with your father. He's been approached by Northwest Builders about a potential merger." Northwest Builders was our largest local competitor, a company with a different approach and corporate culture, but comparable market share. A merger would significantly alter the competitive landscape in Portland's construction industry. "That's surprising," I said carefully. "Dad didn't mention any merger discussions yesterday." "They're very preliminary," Harold explained. "Marcus Reynolds, their CEO, reached out to your father directly after hearing about our leadership change. They've had a standing interest in joining forces for years, but your father always rejected the idea." "And now?" I prompted. Harold looked uncomfortable. "Your father seemed receptive this time. He asked me to gather financial data for a comparative analysis." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. A merger with Northwest Builders at this juncture would fundamentally disrupt my plans for Anderson Construction. It would dilute my newly established authority and potentially undermine the partnership with James. Did my father indicate why he's entertaining the idea now, after years of rejection? Harold hesitated. He said something about securing the company's future through strategic alliance rather than untested leadership experiments. The message couldn't have been clearer. My father was considering the merger as a counterbalance to my assumption of control. It was a power play, pure and simple. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Thank you for letting me know, Harold. I appreciate your candor." After he left, I sat motionless, staring out the window at the Portland skyline. Just when I thought we were making progress, my father had found a new way to challenge my leadership. The silent partner agreement had secured my position as CEO, but it couldn't prevent strategic decisions approved by the board. Decisions like a merger that could fundamentally alter the company's direction and structure. I pulled out my phone and called James. He answered on the second ring. "Emma, I thought we were meeting tomorrow to discuss the East Side project." "We need to talk sooner," I said, my voice tight. "My father is exploring a merger with Northwest Builders." James was silent for a moment. "That's unexpected and potentially problematic for our partnership." "Exactly. Can you meet me for dinner tonight? We need to discuss our options." "Absolutely. The usual place at 7? Agreed and hung up, my mind already racing through potential scenarios and counter moves. This wasn't just about protecting my position anymore. It was about preserving the vision I had for Anderson Construction. A vision that could be derailed by a hasty merger with a company whose values and approach differed significantly from our own. The rest of the day passed in a fog of meetings and decisions, though my thoughts continually returned to my father's latest maneuver. By the time I met James at our favorite restaurant, a quiet place with private booths perfect for sensitive discussions, I had developed the outline of a strategy. "We need to move quickly," I told James after briefing him fully on what Harold had shared. "If we wait until formal merger discussions begin, it will be harder to counter." James nodded, sipping his wine thoughtfully. "What's your proposed approach?" "Two-pronged," I explained. "First, we accelerate our partnership announcement and first project. If we can generate excitement about Anderson Construction's new direction, both internally and in the market, a merger will seem less attractive to the board." "And the second prong?" "I need to understand exactly what Northwest is offering and why it might appeal to our board. Once I know that, I can develop targeted counter-arguments." I paused. Harold is gathering the financial data for my father. I'm sure he'll share it with me as well. James considered this. "It's solid, but there's a third angle we should consider. Marcus Reynolds, Northwest's CEO, is a pragmatist. If he understands that a merger would face significant internal resistance, he might reconsider his approach. You know Marcus? I asked, surprised. We've crossed paths at industry events. He's ambitious but not reckless. A merger that starts with leadership conflict won't appeal to him. James leaned forward. With your permission, I could reach out informally, test the waters. I hesitated, weighing the risks. What would you say? Nothing direct. Just express surprise at hearing rumors of merger discussions. Mention our partnership. Perhaps suggest that Anderson's new direction under your leadership is generating excitement. He shrugged. Plant seeds of doubt about whether this is the right time for such a move. It was subtle, but potentially effective. Okay, but tread carefully. If my father learns we're actively interfering, it could escalate the situation. We spent the next hour refining our strategy, identifying key board members whose support would be crucial, and planning the accelerated announcement of our partnership. By the time we finished dinner, I felt more centered, more prepared for the battle ahead. As James walked me to my car, he said quietly, "Your father is testing you, Emma. This is his way of seeing how you handle a genuine threat to your authority." I nodded. I know, and I intend to pass that test decisively. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to seize the initiative. I scheduled a board meeting for the end of the week, with the partnership announcement as the primary agenda item. I contacted our PR team to begin preparing materials highlighting Anderson Construction's new strategic direction, and I reached out personally to several key board members, inviting them to private meetings before the formal board session. Just before 9, Harold appeared at my door with a flash drive. "The financial analysis your father requested," he said, placing it on my desk. "I thought you should have a copy." I smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Harold. Your support means everything right now." He nodded, his expression serious. "This company has been my life for 30 years, Emma. I want what's best for its future. Right now, that's you. Not a hasty merger that could disrupt everything we've built." After he left, I inserted the flash drive and began studying the numbers. Northwest Builders' offer was attractive on paper. Premium pricing for shares, guaranteed positions for key executives, expanded market reach through combined resources. But the deeper I looked, the more concerns emerged. Northwest's approach to project management differed significantly from ours, with less emphasis on quality control and more on rapid completion. Their financial structure included higher debt levels than we typically maintained. Most troublingly, their corporate culture was known for high turnover and aggressive cost-cutting, a stark contrast to Anderson's family-oriented, quality-focused environment. Armed with this analysis, I began my meetings with board members. First was Dorothy Summers, a longtime family friend who had served on the board since my grandfather's days. "A merger now would completely disrupt our momentum," I explained, walking her through the specific concerns I'd identified. "Anderson Construction is at a pivotal moment of transformation. The partnership with Carter Architectural Innovations positions us for growth in emerging markets without the risks of a full merger." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "Your father mentioned the Northwest discussions yesterday. He framed it as a strategic opportunity, but I sensed there was more to it." "Dad is struggling with the leadership transition," I acknowledged. "This is his way of reasserting control. But the timing couldn't be worse for the company." Over the next 2 days, I met with each board member individually, making my case against the merger while highlighting the benefits of our current trajectory. Most seemed receptive, though a few remained non-committal, clearly wanting to see how the situation developed before choosing sides. Meanwhile, James reported back on his conversation with Marcus Reynolds. "He was surprised I knew about the merger discussions," James told me. "Apparently, they're even more preliminary than we thought. Just an initial outreach that your father responded to positively." "Did you sense any hesitation on Marcus's part?" "Definitely. When I mentioned our partnership and your new initiatives, he seemed concerned about potential internal conflicts. He asked several questions about your leadership approach and vision for Anderson. This was encouraging news. If Marcus himself was having second thoughts, perhaps the merger threat would dissolve before it fully materialized. The day before the board meeting, my father requested a private meeting. I agreed, curious about his next move. I understand you've been speaking with board members about Northwest Builders, he said without preamble as he settled into a chair, across from my desk. Yes, I acknowledged. As CEO, it's my responsibility to evaluate potential strategic decisions and provide my assessment to the board. And your assessment is negative, he stated flatly. It is. The timing is wrong. The cultural fit is questionable, and the financial benefits don't outweigh the risks to our current momentum. I met his gaze directly. But I suspect you knew that when you entertained the discussion. My father didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, "How did you learn about the merger possibility so quickly?" I have allies in this company, Dad. People who believe in my vision and leadership. I paused. Just as you taught me to cultivate. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his face before it resumed its neutral expression. The board meeting tomorrow. What are you planning? A formal announcement of our partnership with Carter Architectural Innovations, including the Eastside Sustainable Complex as our first joint project. And yes, a discussion of the Northwest merger proposal, with my recommendation against proceeding. My father nodded slowly. And if I support the merger proposal, then the board will have to decide which direction better serves Anderson Construction's future. I leaned forward slightly. But ask yourself this, Dad. Is this merger really what you want for the company you built? Or is it just a way to challenge my authority? He didn't answer immediately. When he did speak, his tone was thoughtful, rather than confrontational. You've handled this well, Emma, better than I expected. It was as close to a compliment as I'd received from him since becoming CEO. I learned from watching you, I said simply. When he left, I felt a subtle shift in our dynamic. The power play wasn't over, but perhaps its nature had changed. This wasn't just about control anymore. It was about earning my father's respect, as a leader in my own right. The board meeting the following day would be crucial. As I prepared my presentation late into the evening, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Determination, anxiety, but also an unexpected sense of gratitude. My father's merger ploy had forced me to articulate my vision for Anderson Construction, more clearly than ever before, to demonstrate my leadership under pressure, to prove that I hadn't simply claimed the CEO title, but was prepared to fight for the company's future. The silent partner agreement had given me a foot in the door. Now it was up to me to show everyone, the board, the employees, my father, and perhaps most importantly myself, that I belonged there. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.